questions after the speakers have made their concluding remarks. While we appreciate our non-media attendees joining us, we will only be taking questions from the media during this event. I will provide you instructions on how to ask questions before we begin the Q&A session. We are here today because all people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect by our federal government. The United States has long been a refuge from people from all over the world forced to flee their homes in search of peace and safety. Many people in U.S. Customs and Border Protection custody, including some who are pregnant, are in fact pursuing their human and legal right to seek asylum in this country. No one should be subject to prolonged detention in CBP facilities, including Border Patrol stations. Pregnant people who are subjected to federal custody deserve compassion. This morning, you will hear the story of a Guatemalan woman who came to the United States seeking asylum protection, and how the agencies entrusted to uphold our laws and values failed to act responsibly, humiliating her and endangering her life and the life of her newborn baby. Our first speaker is Monika Langarica, immigrant rights staff attorney for the ACLU Foundation of San Diego Imperial Counties. Monika will tell you details of our client's story and the actions we are taking to make sure that what happened to this woman does not happen again to anyone. Following Monika, our second speaker is Kate Clark, Senior Director of Immigration Services for Jewish Family Service of San Diego. Kate will tell you about the care our client and her family received at the JFS Migrant Family Shelter here in San Diego. Following Kate's comments will be an opportunity for reporters to ask their questions. Thank you. Monika?
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you everybody for being here. Good morning, my name is Monika Langarica. I'm the Immigrants Rights Staff Attorney for the ACLU Foundation of San Diego and Imperial Counties. This morning, the ACLU Foundation of San Diego and Imperial Counties, together with Jewish Family Service of San Diego, filed an administrative complaint with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Inspector General, or OIG for short. The complaint calls for an of a 20-list of border that placed her and her newborn baby at unnecessary risk. Just pausing for a second. This is Migrant Family Shelter where she and her child received care. We're filing this complaint because CBP facilities, including U.S. Border Patrol stations, are categorically unsuitable for pregnant people and newborn babies. But CBP routinely and irresponsibly detains pregnant people, putting their health in grave danger by denying them access to proper medical care. This case is just one of the latest and most egregious examples of this agency's callousness. This woman, who we are calling Anna to protect her privacy, arrived in the United States with her husband and two young daughters, seeking asylum in early 2019. The family was forced to remain in Mexico under the so-called migrant protection protocols while their case was processed through the courts. But fearing for their safety in Mexico, the family traveled to the United States in February of this year, and they were arrested by Border Patrol. During their journey, Anna, who was 8 months pregnant, experienced serious illness and pain in her womb, which she later realized was labor. When Border Patrol agents arrested her and her family near the border, she was in serious distress and pleading for medical care. But instead of transporting her to a hospital, the agents took her to a Border Patrol station for routine processing. There, her pain worsened until she eventually gave birth, standing, holding onto a garbage can for support. She partially delivered her baby into her pants, and it was then that she was transported to a hospital. For days after the birth, while she continued in Border Patrol custody, Border Patrol agents and hospital staff denied Ana a shower even after she asked for one. When the hospital discharged her, instead of allowing her to immediately reunite with her family in the United States that was prepared to receive her, Border Patrol forced her to spend yet another night at a Border Patrol station in a freezing cell with her newborn baby. And there, they denied her a clean blanket for her baby. After the incident, Border Patrol issued a press statement riddled with false details about Ana's experience enduring labor and giving birth in custody without proper medical care. As some of you may know, on January 22nd, 2020, the ACLU Foundation of San Diego and Imperial counties, together with the ACLU Border Rights Center, submitted the first in a 4-part series of administrative complaints to the OIG, calling for an immediate review of CBP's treatment of people detained by the agency. The first complaint, which addressed the treatment of pregnant people in CBP custody, included a series of recommendations calling on OIG to demand that CBP stop detaining pregnant people and instead release them promptly to their families or sponsors in the United States, that CBP formally exempt all pregnant people from MPP and other abusive border policies, that CBP ensure that pregnant people taken into custody have access to proper medical care, and calling on OIG to assess whether CBP disciplinary procedures are adequate accountability mechanisms. The remaining complaints addressed the mistreatment of sick children, family separation, and verbal abuse that people detained at CBP and Border Patrol facilities have experienced. Through these 4 administrative complaints, the ACLU is calling on the OIG to review the conditions of CBP and Border Patrol detention facilities and to issue prompt and meaningful recommendations to protect vulnerable populations held in those facilities. Today, we submitted an additional complaint to OIG on behalf of our client, Ana, calling on the Inspector General to investigate what happened in her case, demanding that it review the CBP policies and procedures that resulted in the abuse that Ana and many others have suffered, and urging CBP to adopt further recommendations. We're calling on OIG to recommend that CBP immediately transport all pregnant people it detains to a local hospital for evaluation, that it respect the privacy of people in labor and receiving postpartum care, that it release people who are forced to give birth in custody as soon as possible, and that it ensure circumstances like Ana and her family, including pregnant people and newborn babies. We're also asking members of Congress to join us in calling for this OIG review. Congress must exercise appropriate oversight of DHS's Office of the Inspector General to ensure a prompt response to these administrative complaints. And today, a group of US senators led by Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut issued a letter calling for an investigation of the mistreatment of pregnant detainees in CBP custody. You can contact his office for comment and for a copy of that letter. Importantly, we ask you to join us in demanding similar action. Thank you again for covering this important issue. I'll now introduce Kate Clark, Senior Director of Immigration Services at Jewish Family Service of San Diego, who will describe the care that Ana received at JFS's Migrant Family Shelter.
Thank you, Monika. Jewish Family Service of San Diego provides critical services to individuals and families seeking asylum in the San Diego-Tijuana border region, including legal representation and operation of the JFS Migrant Family Shelter in San Diego. We first heard about Ana and the horrific details surrounding her case when Border Patrol dropped her and her family off at the JFS Migrant Family Shelter on February 19th, 2020. We immediately saw that Ana had a newborn child with her, and our medical partner, UC San Diego Health, promptly began assessing the newborn's health along with the health of the entire family. Medical screenings are the first thing we do when families arrive at the shelter. And for this family in particular, critical behavioral health support was provided to this family given the significant trauma sustained while in Border Patrol custody. For the first time in a long time, families like La'ana receive new clothing, food and adequate nutrition, a safe place to sleep, travel coordination, and legal assistance. These are all basic necessities, and these same necessities have been provided by JFS to more than 23,000 individuals or 9,200 asylum-seeking families who have come through our shelter in the past year and a half. These pictures you are seeing are not of the family involved in this complaint, but rather represent those who we've served since October 2018 at our shelter. Indeed, it was at the JFS Migrant Family Shelter that Anna was able to take her first shower on the 4th day after giving birth, after being transported from the hospital back to a Border Patrol station, and then finally to the shelter. When the family had the opportunity to receive the care it needed and finally felt safe and secure, we learned the specifics of this family's horrific experience while in detention. Together with our partner, the ACLU Foundation of San Diego and Imperial counties, we took action on this family's behalf. Jewish Family Service of San Diego officially joins the ACLU in calling for the Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Inspector General to investigate this incident and adopt the vital recommendations outlined in our complaint so that no pregnant person has to endure the heinous conditions Anna experienced in this case. Every mother and newborn deserves to be in a hospital where doctors can provide life-saving medical interventions. To repeat it again, Anna gave birth in her pants, in a detention facility, holding onto a trash can with ungloved staffs reaching out for her baby. This is not okay in any circumstance. Before JFS has the opportunity to assist any asylum seekers, their treatment in government facilities must be fair and humane, with special emphasis on vulnerable populations like pregnant women. Today we call on the Office of the Inspector General to investigate Anna's case, review the policies and procedures that resulted in the abuse Anna suffered, and finally to adopt the 8 recommendations we have elaborated on in greater detail in the complaint. It's long past the time to do the right thing.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Monika. I'm going to have our slides with the recommendations, the 8 recommendations on them, put back up to share with our audience. And so now we will take some questions. So members of the media, please notify our staff if you have a question so that we might unmute your mic. We'll take questions on a first come, first served basis. So if you are contacting us via PC, Mac, or tablet, you can click on the icon labeled raise hand at the bottom of your screen center. To virtually raise your hand, to lower your virtual hand, you only need to click the same button labeled that now lower your hand. Once our Q&A moderator acknowledges you and unmutes your mic, please state your name, your media outlet before asking your question. After you've completed that, you'll be placed back on mute and you may raise your hand again to ask a follow-up question. To use the Zoom Q&A feature, which is also at the bottom of your screen, to type in your question, the window will appear. Please provide us your name and media outlet together with your question. I will read your question aloud and then turn it over to our panelists to respond. If you are participating by telephone, to raise your hand to ask a question, you need only press *9. And once our Q&A moderator acknowledges you and unmutes your mic, state your name, your media outlet, pose your question, and then after that we will mute your mic, and again you can press *9 again to ask a follow-up question. The Zoom chat feature is not available for people who are participating by telephone. So I'll turn it over to our Q&A moderator. We'll put the recommendations back up on the screen so that the press can see them. And we'll take our first question.
We have a first question from Salvador Rivera. Please go ahead and speak. I'm going to unmute your mic now. It doesn't appear that he can speak at the moment. Sal, I believe you are allowed to speak. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, sorry. Quick question. Okay, so did Anna deliver boy or girl? Condition of the baby after delivery and now? Were there any complications? And also, Border Patrol released a statement, a news release on the Wednesday after the birth, and they stated that the agents actually delivered the baby, helped deliver the baby.
Excuse me.
And we're taking
Salvador?
How do these accounts
Salvador?
so much? Yes.
It may be best for you. We're having trouble hearing you. Perhaps you can type your question and then
Okay, I did type them
read it
in.
aloud.
Okay, they're in there, so help me out. Thank you.
Okay, I see your question. Border Patrol stated agents helped deliver the baby. How do accounts of the delivery vary so much? Salvador Rivera from Fox 5 Border Report.
I can take that, and then Kate, feel free to add. Thank you for that question. One of the things that we outline in our complaint is how what great discrepancies there are between Border Patrol's media statement and our client's account. And because of those discrepancies and those, what we know are false statements and a number of false details in Border Patrol's statement, we are asking for OIG's investigation to get at what exactly happened and to take it from there.
We have another question from Kate Morrissey. She states, she asked that, you said that CBP issued a statement with a number of falsehoods in it. Can you identify what are some of those, or what some of those were?
I'm happy to identify a couple, and then I invite members of the press to take a look at the redacted version of the complaint that I think will be shared shortly, which gets at some more of these details. But an example of the false statements includes Border Patrol's contention that staff prepared an area for Anna to deliver her baby, and also made statements like that Anna and her family climbed a ladder to get over the border. Both of those are two examples of the just egregious nature of the misstatements, and again, of the need for meaningful review and investigation into what exactly happened in our client's case.
Thank you, Monica. Follow-up from Carlos Gonzalez of Univision. No, excuse me, from Univision. Can we have Monica please state the recommendations, the basic points in Spanish?
Sure thing, if you give me one second to pull them up. A base de la denuncia que hemos sometido hoy por parte de nuestra cliente Ana, estamos exigiendo que la agencia de aduanas, conocida como CBP, inmediatamente transporte personas embarazadas a hospitales para evaluación médica propia. Estamos exigiendo que la agencia de CBP respete la privacidad de la gente que está en parto o recibiendo cuidado después de haber dado luz. Estamos exigiendo que la agencia inmediatamente libere a las personas que tienen que o que son forzadas a dar luz en la custodia de la agencia, exigiendo que son forzadas dentro de estas circunstancias, por lo menos acceso a necesidades muy básicas.
Thank you, Monika. We have a question from Max Rivlin Nadler. Please state your media outlet.
Yeah, hi, Max Rivlin Nadler, KPBS. So I've got a question and then a follow-up. I know there had been previous instances of even when people in Border Patrol custody were taken to the hospital of allegations of mistreatment. I know there was a woman in December who was taken to the hospital in Chula, Vista, who, you know, essentially gave birth in custody and then wasn't allowed to see her child. So I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit more how this kind of fits a larger kind of pattern and practice of people, you know, giving birth under these circumstances. And I know your recommendation is to take people to the hospital, but also what kind of things need to happen at the hospital to ensure the safety of both the mother and the child.
I can start. So I think it's critical that any individual pregnant mother, upon apprehension or contact with CBP, is provided a medical screening, and we elaborate in greater detail in the complaint. But it's critical to have that assessment so that decisions can be made whether, you know, the mother would stay in the hospital for, you know, medical interventions that could be provided immediately. In this case, you know, mother would have been in the hospital to give birth to her child, and, you know, should the case have needed a medical intervention immediately, that would have been an opportunity to have that provided in this case. So it's critical that the screening and assessment of individuals that have medical conditions, in this case a pregnant mom, is provided, and then follow-up decisions can be made regarding their ability to seek additional medical care.
Thanks, Kate.
Great.
Kate Morris.
Could I get a follow-up?
Sure, Max, go ahead.
Great. And then there had been a turnback policy by Customs and Border Protection at the border of pregnant women who were in the Remain in Mexico program like this. How does that turnback program kind of incentivize people crossing outside of a port of entry like this woman did, and you know, basically perpetuate what is suboptimal conditions for delivering a child?
I can take that. It's, you know, we can speculate as to what you know, as to causation, what causes what, but we know that these things are related. And I just want to, you know, contextualize this one more in the context of our office's earlier January 22nd, 2020 complaint, wherein, you know, our top line recommendations there are: one, that CBP stop detaining pregnant people and instead release them promptly to their networks of care in the United States; and two, that CBP formally exempt pregnant people from things like MPP and abusive border policies. You know, and I think it's after that we get into the further recommendations about providing proper care if and when people are forced into these circumstances. This could be resolved if CBP stopped detaining people and exempted them from these policies to begin with.
Thank you, Monika. Kate Morrissey from Union Tribune has a follow-up to Salvador Rivera's question. His question was baby boy or girl, the condition of the child at night of delivery, and were there any complications? And additional question from Salvador Rivera, so perhaps all of these can be answered at once. Who else was with Ana beside her husband? Any other children?
I can take that. Anna delivered a baby girl. And then as to who else was with her, there were her two other children, a 2-year-old and a 12-year-old. Notably, when Anna was taken to the hospital, she was taken separately. So her husband and her 2 other children were forced to remain at the Border Patrol station and did not have access to information about their well-being while Anna and her newborn were in the hospital. And as to conditions and complications, I won't get into too many details about that. Again, we encourage you all to take a look at the complaint that I believe Ed circulated with the press release to learn more. But we are, doing our best to both call for meaningful review about what happened in her case and also respect her and her family's privacy.
Thank you, Monica. Are there any other questions? Salvador Rivera, Fox 5 Border Report. Please ask your question.
Can you hear me? No.
Yes, let's try it again. If there's any problem, we'll just ask you to type it.
Okay. Well, let me play devil's advocate. Let's just say the policy did change and pregnant women were released to loved ones or people who might take care of them. Wouldn't this open the floodgates for pregnant women to try to come into the U.S.?
I believe the question is, and we will need you, you know what, Salvador, if
Yes.
you would please type it because I don't want to misstate your question. If you have a moment to type it, that would be great. In the meantime, are there any other questions? We're going to give him a couple of minutes. Do our speakers want to share anything else that they were unable to share in their opening statements? Well, while we're waiting, why don't we put the 8 recommendations back up on the screen so that everyone can see them? Trying to share those slides and also have people interact, asking questions whenever was slowing down our presentation. But so while we're waiting on Salvador, we can share that.
I just want to reiterate the significance of Senator Blumenthal's or the letter from members of Congress led by Senator Blumenthal that was released today, echoing our calls for meaningful review and for recommendations. So we encourage you all to follow up with the Senator's office about that and to take a look at that letter.
Thank you, Monica. Salvador Rivera's question, Fox 5 Border Report. If policy did change and pregnant women were released to loved ones or agencies willing to help, wouldn't this open the floodgates for pregnant women to come to the United States? Playing devil's advocate here. Thank you.
I can take a first crack at that, and then Kate, if you have anything to add, a couple points there. One, release of families at the border, including people who are pregnant, for a long time was the practice that we observed here at the border. And we are simply, one of the things that we're asking for is a return to those practices that we know encourage safety and encourage people to rely on their networks of care in the United States, which exist by and large. And Kate could speak to that in terms of the people that her organization sees at the Jewish Family Services Migrant Family Shelter. The second point here is that people are are entitled to seek asylum that is recognized under domestic law and international obligations. And people are also entitled to humane care. They're entitled to medical care that is going to keep them safe, and medical care that's going to keep newborn babies safe. And those are top line rights and entitlements that people have, and they're not qualified. And I'm happy to pass it to Kate if she has anything to add. And also, I know Mitra Badalahi from our office, who led our complaint series of complaints to OIG. If she has anything to add, I'd be happy.
Yeah, I just have one point to add to Monika's points that she's laid out. So simply put, the facilities, DHS facilities they're not equipped to house pregnant women. They don't have the relevant medical capacity in place to provide care for pregnant women. And so in this case specifically, this family was lucky that there was not any issues sustained by mom or child as a result of having this birth in custody. But as Monika mentioned, release into the United States to organizations like JFS, where there is a medical infrastructure and component to provide that critical care both before and after baby is born, is really important, not only for the human right aspect of it, but to preserve the asylum seeking process for all individuals that are fleeing their country.
I want to give a moment if Mitra wants to join in, but if not, we're going to go to our last question.
Thank you all. I do not have anything to add, and I just echo the appreciation for the interest in this really important development.
Thank you, Mitra. From Carlos Gonzalez, Univision. Can you clarify if the family went to which port of entry when they were asking for asylum, and then to provide that information in Spanish as well?
The family was apprehended near the border and ended up being transported to the Chula Vista Border Patrol Station. And that's after they had been forced into the so-called migrant protection protocols last year and subsequently feared harm in Mexico. So I can repeat that in Spanish. La familia de Ana fue arrestada cerca de la frontera y agentes con la patrulla fronteriza los transportaron a la estación de la patrulla fronteriza de Chula Vista. Todo esto fue después de que el gobierno federal forzó a la familia bajo la política de MPP o permanecer en México, y después de que la familia temó abusos en México.
Thank you. And this is the last question. Where are Ana and her family now?
So the family has transferred out of the shelter, which we're really excited to report that they've been reunited with their points of contact within the United States. To preserve her confidentiality, we're not disclosing the location, but we can report that Ana and her family are with their rest of their family that is inside the United States.
Thank you, Kate, Monika, and all of you for participating in this press conference. We will wrap now. If you have any follow-up questions, please refer to our press release, which has contact information both for our senior media strategist, communication strategist at the ACLU Foundation of San Diego Imperial Counties, and our communications expert with Jewish Family Service. Thank you so much. We will wrap here. We look forward to sharing information with you again and to engage with you on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you.